Good evening, everyone. Nice to see everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to our special edition of a Wednesday night class. This week we're learning Parashat Veyetze. We'll be studying the words of the Zera Shimshon, as well as the words from Rav Aryeh Leib Haman. Let me just mute everybody. Perfect. Okay, we'd like to make a special welcome to Mrs. Hannah Breutman, who is Uncle Leib's baby sister. Thank you for welcoming, for joining us to our class, and we welcome you, and we bless you to have a long and healthy, happy life, and we look forward to you joining our class to hear the great wisdom of your brother that I'm sure you've heard in I'm sure you've heard in real life. Can everyone hear me well? I'm getting complaints that I'm not loud enough. Can everyone hear me well? Give me a thumbs up. All right. Okay, so let's start with a little synopsis of this week's parasha, and then we're going to get into the insights of our great sages that we learn on a weekly basis. Baruch Hashem, we have a great merit. So at the end of last week's parasha, we end off with Yaakov taking the blessing from his brother Esav, and we find ourselves in a very interesting situation because Isaac doesn't know where to put himself. On one hand, he was scared that he gave the blessing to Jacob, although he understood that it was Mina Shamayim, it was all divine intervention and prepared that way. And then it was evident that Esav was angry. But what wasn't evident was how angry he actually was. He was definitely angry. Even Isaac was very, very scared, unfortunately. Unfortunately, Isaac himself was very scared of the fact that the blessing was given to Yaakov and not to Esav. So he was very angry. He was screaming. Yitzchak was scared. But then Esav made up in his mind, and this is the end of the last week's Torah portion, he made up in his mind that he's going to murder his brother Yaakov. And this was a very scary thing, and it was told, as the Torah tells us, it was told through divine inspiration to Rivka, the mother of these two twins, which now have become adversaries. Hashem told Rivka that her older son wanted to kill her younger son. He was waiting for the perfect moment. Was it going to be when their father passes away or when he was not looking? Different debates. So she comes as a wise wife, full of intuition and wisdom. She comes and she tells her husband, listen, our son now is of marriageable age. It's time that he gets married. And he's 63 years old. He received these blessings. I need him to leave this town to go find a proper wife. I don't want him to have, like Esav, any of the wives that are amongst the locals over here. Rather, let's send him back to my hometown, and hopefully maybe my brother has a daughter that would be suitable for a wife for Jacob. And that's what happens. So Rivka knew that Esav wanted to kill him. She comes and convinces her husband, it's Yitzchak, to send Yaakov away. And that is what happens. On the way going to find a wife, Yaakov, again, at the age 63, he says, I may not be ready for marriage yet. 63 years old, patriarch, okay? I may not be ready for marriage yet. So what he does is he stops and he learns in the yeshiva for 14 years. Now, mind you, there's a midrash that says this is not the first time. Like, how did he know where to go? Did he just chance upon the yeshiva of Shem and Ever? No, he actually was there for 32 years prior. Earlier on in his life, He spent 32 years in this yeshiva. Then he went back home. And then at this point, after he got the blessings, he's on his way out and he says, you know what? I need to make sure that I'm ready to be wed and to have children and go out into the real world. So he goes and he recharges for another 14 years of complete Torah devotion. And that takes him to the age of 77. 77 is when he finally leaves the yeshiva. He's on his way to Haran, as his parents told him, to go find a wife. Now, the Talmud in Masechet Chulin tells us something extraordinary. The Talmud says that when Yaakov gets to the border of Israel and Haran, he remembers that, wow, he passed a very special place and he did not go and pray. The place was Har HaMoriah. This was the place where Yaakov realizes, wow, my father was taken by my grandfather to be sacrificed over there. And as we mentioned, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, that was the very place where the world was created from. It was the center of the world that we have. He says, I passed by that place and I didn't stop to pray. It's such a holy place where my father was willing to sacrifice his life, where my grandfather passed his 10th test. He decides to turn around and go back. So he was traveling very quick. In Hebrew, we call it kfitzat haderech, because it was a great miracle how fast he was able to travel by foot. So he goes and he's traveling by foot and he ends up passing Har HaMoriah. He turns around, says the Talmud, and decides to go back. Again, in a quick jiffy, he finds himself back at the holy place of Har HaMoriah. Now, you may be asking, I'm just pausing, you may be asking, why is Jacob traveling by foot? Ron, I see you. That was your question, right? Telepathy. How come is our patriarch traveling by foot? He had a rich father. He had a rich grandfather. He was 63 years old. He must have been able to put some money together to buy a Mustang or something. Like hello. So why is he traveling by foot? So listen to what happened. As soon as Esav got wind, it was a known thing that Yaakov was leaving and traveling. Esav said, that's it, now I'm going to have him killed. Because he's not going to be known to my parents if he gets killed now, later, by who? So as soon as Yaakov leaves, Esav sends his son Eliphaz. We've heard this name before, right? Eliphaz was mandated by his father as a Torah obligation, kibud av va'em, to honor your father and your mother. And Esav tells his son, you are to go to follow my brother and you are to murder him. He's done a horrible thing. He's taken my blessing. He stole my birthright. And he is a horrible individual. Eliphaz was actually a righteous individual. And he listened to his father, because there is a mitzvah in the Torah to listen to your father and your mother. His father gave him a clear and direct command. So he's on his way. He catches up to his uncle Yaakov, who, by the way, Yaakov was Eliphaz's Rebbe. Can you imagine being commanded by your father to kill your rabbi? Chas v'shalom. To which it's very possible that Eliphaz spent more time, for sure more quality time, with Yaakov, his uncle, his Rebbe, over his father, his evil father Esav. Nevertheless, his father commanded him. So he catches up to Yaakov and he has this internal debate. He's about to kill him, and then Yaakov says, what are you doing? Thou shalt not murder. Then he says, well, I have an obligation to honor thy father and thy mother. My father commanded me. So Yaakov tells him a very interesting thing. He tells him, you know what? You are in a very interesting situation. If you come home telling your father that you did not complete this, your father will not put this to rest. He may harm you, God forbid. He may send someone else that may have no remorse to come and kill me, or whatever the case is. So Yaakov decides not to tell his nephew, sorry, according to halakha, you're not allowed to kill me, because that would not be either sufficient for him or it wouldn't have good results consequences later on. So instead, what he said is, there is a law that a poor person is considered dead. In ani is nechshav kemet. A poor person is considered dead. We all understand it's very, very hard, not comfortable, not great. Many people say they prefer to die than be poor. Okay? There is a concept, again, I obviously don't agree with it, but there is a concept that poverty is equivalent to death. So Yaakov tells Eliphaz, take all my belongings, all the gifts that my parents gave me for my prospective wife, for all the travel money, my credit card, my gold, my silver, my Mustang, my cattle, everything I have along with me. And that's why Yaakov is traveling bare. He literally has maybe just the clothes on his back and nothing else to his name. And that's why the Talmud is telling us that there was a tremendous miracle of Kfitzat HaDerech, how Yaakov was able to literally jump leaps and bounds just by foot in order to get to his destinations. So coming back to what we said in the Talmud is telling us that Yaakov passes by a holy place, Har Moriah, and decides, whoa, I did not pray there. He turns around and he goes back. He's ready to leave, so he prays there. He prays Arvit, as the Talmud explains us. That is the evening prayer, the prayer which is adopted by and in commemoration of Yaakov, right? Shacharit, morning services is Abraham, middle of the day Mincha is Isaac, and the evening Arvit is Yaakov. So he delivers his evening prayer, speaks to God at this holy, holy place, and he's ready to leave and to continue on to Haran. And Hashem made the sun set very quickly. He set it so quickly that Yaakov had to decide instantly, okay, I'm staying here overnight. No one travels at night, especially back in the day, especially by foot. He sets up camp and he's about to go to sleep. And what he does is he prepares 12 stones. We all know this very famous portion, episode in our Torah. He prepares 12 stones and he puts them around himself and he falls asleep. The stones are fighting one another. I want to be the pillow under the righteous Jacob. No, I want to. No, I want to. And then we see that they all come together as being one stone under his head. So I want to show you this synopsis I gave you. I want to show you the majority of the synopsis based on the words of our verse, and then we're going to go into the great novelty of the Zera Shimshon. So if you take a look at your screen, this is the beginning of this week's Torah portion. It's in chapter 28 in Genesis, verse 10. It says, Veyetze Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harana. And Jacob leaves Beersheva. That's where him and his family, his parents were living. And he goes to Haran. Again, he takes a 14-year stop and break to continue his Torah education. Then the Torah goes on to say, Vaifga bamakom hahu, and he's arrived at that place, Vayalen sham. So what's the place? Makom, we've had this before. Makom, the place is Mount Moriah. That's where Abraham brings Abraham brings Isaac for sacrifice. This is where Jacob comes and he rests his head. It's the place of the creation of where Adam was even cast and created from. Vayalen sham, and he goes to sleep. So Vaifka, Rashi explains the terminology. He comes and he prays there. At this place, the place gets dark. Vayalen sham, Hashem wanted to host him, so he sleeps there. Kiva Hashemesh, the sun sets quickly, as we just explained. Vaikach me'avnei makom. So now he takes 12 stones. Vayasem al hashtav. He puts them around his head. Vaishkav b'makom ahu, and he goes and he sleeps. Rashi tells us this is the first time that Yaakov is having a proper sleep since the time that he left his home. Meaning, over the past 14 years, when he was in the yeshiva, he was dozing on the bench in the yeshiva. Sometimes he would sleep, sometimes he wouldn't sleep, but primarily he was learning completely. This was the first time that he got a full night's rest and good sleep after 14 years. Okay, so this is just as an introduction. Now the Zera Shimshon brings a very interesting midrash and a very powerful lesson in my opinion. The Midrash says that the world put up a wall to stop Jacob in his path. And what that means is that the world literally put up a wall to make sure that Jacob sleeps at this place. And that's also something which contributes to the fact that the sun sets so quickly, because the world itself was doing everything it could to make sure that Jacob spends time in this place for the evening. And the question is why? Why to such a degree of putting up a wall to literally holding him back there for the night? What type of benefit was the world, as the Midrash says, was the world trying to gain by having Jacob stay there overnight? So listen to how the Zera Shimshon answers. He answers with the Midrash of the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. The Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says that when all the stones were around Jacob's head, it's not so common that 12 stones automatically become one. There's something more that was going on over here. And that there was something, the Midrash says. The Midrash says that when Yaakov placed these stones around him and one under his head, Hashem joined these stones together and then extended it until it reached the depths of the earth, to literally the core of the earth, which would act as a support. This is what the Midrash says. So the Zera Shimshon, this is a fascinating concept. So again, all these stones come together and then they form a coalition, so to say, to dig deep into the depths of the earth, all the way to the core, to solidify the foundation of the earth. So the Zera Shimshon says that it seems like from the creation of the world until now, which is approximately 2,100 years after the creation of the earth, 21-ish, maybe even more, 2150-ish. So it seems that the world was not, the Zera Shimshon explains, was not strong in its foundation until this moment. But it took Jacob to come along with his stone to have this done. And that's why the Midrash tells us that the world put up a wall to stop Jacob. Literally because the world needed Jacob to come and solidify its foundation, the world's foundation, so that it would continue to exist. Jacob needed to come to Har Moriah to strengthen the foundation of the world. And if it wasn't for him coming, the world could not exist. So the world put up a wall, so to say, to hold Jacob there at that place. So now the Zera Shimshon asks the question that we are all asking, and we're saying, why now out of all times? Out of all times of Jacob's life, if for some reason Jacob is the designated one, or any of our patriarchs, why is it right now, after he finishes learning in yeshiva and he's off to get married? Well, the Zera Shimshon says that's precisely the answer. We have to remember, Abraham was an individual. He was the innovator of the creator God. He found Hashem. He was first generation. Second generation, we were starting to clean out any of the impurity and the filth of the previous generation. So there was Ishmael and there was Isaac. And then even in Isaac, it wasn't really perfect yet, because in his two sons, as we explained last week, there was one impure and one pure. Jacob's children were all pure. Jacob we're considered Bnei Yaakov. We're not referred to as Bnei Avraham, Bnei Yitzchak, the children of Abraham, the children of Isaac. We are also, but if we are referred to as a family, we're referred to as Bnei Yaakov, or as we know, Bnei Yisrael, which is Yaakov. Jacob is our own patriarch. See, Abraham is the patriarch to many nations. Isaac is to multiple nations. Jacob is our one and only focused, our own patriarch. And for that reason, he has some certain advantages or certain importances that the other patriarchs may not have. The Zera Shimshon says, what's Jacob about to do now? He's about to go get married. He just spent the past 77 years of his life preparing to get married. And that's what he was out and going to do. Right now, before getting married and establishing his 12 sons, the tribes of the Jewish nation, the world had to be solidified. The world's foundation had to be strengthened. Right now, it mattered most because it was no longer going to be an individual or a family. It was going to become a nation. This is what the Zera Shimshon says, and on this I had one lesson I wanted to share with everyone. And the lesson is as follows. There's a great importance. We see our Torah is teaching us. We see the Zera Shimshon is teaching us. There's a great importance in laying down proper and strong building foundation. Whatever the foundation, the type of foundation is needed. When it comes to building something of matter, of a structure, we obviously understand. Just like a tree is as strong as its roots, a building is as strong as its foundation. And maybe on a more personal level, on a more interpersonal level, the strengthening that is done at the beginning of relationships, or the more that is invested in relationships when it comes to one's children, one's spouse, one's business associates and partners, neighbors, friends, acquaintances, whatever investment we put in to build a strong foundation, a foundation which is based on respect, on happiness, on ethics and etiquette, morality, love for the other, care for the other. These are foundations when instituted in a proper and very strong way, really last long and hopefully are extremely helpful. We see that sometimes, maybe in the middle of a person's life or in the middle of a person's relationship, there's certain strengthenings or reinforcements that need to be made when it comes to the foundations, just as the world had to solidify its foundation and its structure to continue forevermore. So too, we have those moments in our lives which we may have to strengthen certain foundations, certain relationships, certain settings in our life. So that's the lesson I wanted to share with us from the Zera Shimshon.